And a story that begins in the late 70s when people began disappearing from Japan. North Korea was suspected of being involved, but it wasn't until much later, 2012 in fact, that Pyongyang admitted to kidnapping 13 Japanese citizens. Some were involved in the training of spies. While Japan's government says the total number of abductees is 17, the National Police Agency estimates as many as 860. Tokyo says it's determined to secure the return of all of its citizens. Justin McCurry reports.
Securing the return of her daughter has become a near lifelong battle for Sakie Yokota. Yet again, she calls on North Korea, whose agents kidnapped her daughter Megumi 36 years ago, to allow her to be reunited with her family in Japan.
My only wish is to experience the joy of having a loved one return to Japan. Thank you.
Sakie and her husband, Shigeru, finally have cause for optimism. Japan recently agreed to lift some sanctions against North Korea after Pyongyang reopened an investigation into the fate of the Japanese abductees. Sakie Yokota is again allowing herself to dream of her daughter's return.
It's great to see that negotiations have resumed after 11 years. And since Pyongyang has stopped claiming that all the abductees died, we can at least highlight the fact that North Korea's stance has changed.
The Yokotas recall how their daughter was abducted on her way home from school when she was just 13. She's not been heard from since that day in 1977. All her parents have are a few photographs of their daughter taken in North Korea. Pyongyang had said Megumi killed herself in 1994, but the Yokotas refused to believe that claim. In March, they met Megumi's daughter in Mongolia.
She is as energetic and full of life as her mother. We also met her 10-month-old baby girl, our great-granddaughter. She's a really cute baby. I felt genuinely happy for the first time in decades.
At least 17 Japanese nationals were abducted in the 1970s and 80s and taken to North Korea to teach the Japanese language and customs to communist spies. 5 of them were allowed to return to Japan in 2002 after a landmark summit between the country's then leaders. The abductees were probably taken to North Korea in boats like this, a spy vessel captured by Japan after a confrontation at sea, now on display at a museum in Yokohama.
The abductions were carried out in these areas. This corresponds with the places that vessels of that kind were spotted, such as in Niigata, where Megumi was snatched. But it's hard to say whether or not these exact boats were used for kidnapping.
We head to the headquarters of the Choson Sinbo, a Tokyo-based newspaper considered close to Pyongyang. This senior member of staff believes the current thawing of ties between Japan and North Korea will benefit the hundreds of thousands of Korean residents of Japan.
Only a limited number of sanctions against North Korea have been lifted. For example, the ship used to take Korean residents of Japan back to North Korea still isn't operating. During recent negotiations, Japan vowed to review the situation for Korean residents. Many have faced discrimination in Japan since the end of the Second World War. This has given the Korean community hope.
The fate of the abductees is hugely important in Japan and a personal mission for its Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Resolution could dramatically improve ties between Japan and North Korea and mark a historic step forward for the isolated dictatorship in Pyongyang.
For more on this, I'm now joined on set by Antoine Bondaz, an expert on North Korea at the Paris-based Asia Centre. Hello, thanks very much for being with us. Now, before we go into the situation now, I'd just like to go back a little bit to 2002. Why is it that it took Pyongyang so long to come clean, to admit to these kidnappings?
First of all, it's very difficult for Pyongyang to accept the truth and to apologize actually to the Japanese, because it's a North Korean actually psyche. The way actually they describe Japan is like Japan as a criminal, Japan as a colonial power, Japan as the invader during the colonial era, during the post-World War II era. So it was very difficult, actually, to the leadership in North Korea to accept and to apologize to the Japanese current enemy. But then with Koizumi, actually, former Prime Minister Koizumi visiting North Korea, in 2002, it was a landmark meeting, as you said in the video. And North Korea had to do something, and North Korea had to diversify, actually, its partnership. North Korea was already actually quite close to Japan. Japan was the main trade partner of North Korea. But North Korea had to diversify its support, to diversify them from China, from South Korea, from the US.
Is honesty, though, necessarily the best policy? Because that admission dates back to 2002. And as we were hearing in the report, now the Japanese government is saying they're really going to set up a commission. They want to take this a lot further. But in more than a decade, it seems there hasn't been much progress on the issue.
No, because the main actually problem in these bilateral relations, more than the abducted issue, was the nuclear and ballistic issue. Now it seems that actually Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is trying to get closer to North Korea, and North Korea is trying to take the opportunity to get closer to Japan. North Korea is isolated more than ever in the region, isolated from China in a way, from South Korea and from the US, and it's actually the same from Shinzo Abe, of Shinzo Abe's Japan. And Japan actually is trying to get closer to North Korea. So it's not about honesty, actually, it's more about politics.
And why now, though? Why would they be trying to get closer to them now? What are the circumstances that have meant that this is possible?
Shinzo Abe and Japan is isolated now, isolated from South Korea and isolated from China. If Japan actually gets a bit closer to North Korea, it will force actually South Korea and China to restart dialogue with Japan and to get closer to Japan. So actually, I think it's not... the main issue actually is not North Korea, it's how to restart dialogue with China and South Korea.
Okay, now if we just get back to the abductees, have other countries got involved in this and tried to help Japan to get the kidnapper, the detainees back?
Officially, there is no other abductees from other nations. Officially, it's only Japanese citizens. But it seems clear actually that even like South Korean people and citizens has been abducted by by North Korea, sorry. For Japan, actually, it's a very big issue, and it has always been the main issue in the bilateral relations, and that's why Shinzo Abe is focusing on it. But then, no, actually, other countries are so much focused on the nuclear issue and on the ballistic issue that the abducted issue, for them, it's a secondary one.
Do you think that perhaps, though, Pyongyang will end up admitting to more abductees? Because, as I was saying in the introduction, officially there's just 17. The Japanese government says that, but its own police force says hundreds. Do you have any idea what the actual number might be, and if Pyongyang might admit to more in the future?
It's actually impossible to say and to give an exact number, a perfect number. What is sure is that if North Korea see that Japan is ready to get closer to North Korea, is ready to give compensation to North Korea, is ready to give benefits to North Korea, for example, to cancel part of the trade blockers, to cancel, for example, part of the sanction on the remittances. You know, the Zainichi Koreans, North Korean living in Japan actually cannot send money back to North Korea anymore. If they can actually change the sanctions and cancel part of these sanctions, North Korea could admit some abductees, some more abductees.
But if North Korea kidnapped Japanese citizens, why would Japan ease sanctions for getting back its own nationals?
That's the main issue, actually, and that's why there is a big discrepancy between the government and the public opinion. Actually, the Japanese public opinion is not supporting the Japanese policy. It's mostly the Korean Japanese supporting it, because it's a way to get closer to North Korea. For the main public opinion, as you say, I mean, it's why should we give something to Pyongyang when they kidnapped our citizens and when they threaten our national security? For Shinzo Abe, actually, the way he thinks about it is quite different. The idea is, how can we get closer to North Korea? How can we force South Korea and China to get closer to us? And for that, everything is possible.
Okay, thank you very much, Antoine Bondaz, for coming into France 24 for Focus. That's it for Focus. That's it also for our 2-hour live show. I'll be back, though, with a full news roundup for you in just a few minutes. Don't go away.